Again, Peter Woodbridge. Now, if I'd like to, final panel is about to start. Can I invite on stage the moderator for that panel, Damian Ryan, who's partner in Kingston Smith. He's travelled over from London to be with us today. He'll be a very well-known face, I think it's fair to say, in Irish advertising and marketing circles, having worked in a whole host of ventures, including publishing venture, where I think I first encountered you probably as much as, could be 20 years ago at this stage. So, because of various vagaries of the challenges of people and distance, Damian has drawn the short straw in terms of doing the afternoon panel, the last panel, but there's a good audience here, so stay with us because this is going to be interesting, it's going to be provocative. I know Damian has prepared very well for this, so with this panel. So I'm going to let you introduce the panel.
Okay.
I think we've got one live person, IRL, in real life, and this is, we're really testing the AV guys here now. We're going to be bringing in 3 people online for this session.
There we go. There we go. Thank you. Right. Well, thanks everybody for staying around, and we'll try to make this last panel discussion as interesting as possible. I just wanted to reflect. I wanted to share something with you that I was reflecting on earlier. We're here to talk about the metaverse. Hands up, people who have avatars in the metaverse right now. Which Slayer 65? We meet again. Not many hands, not many hands. But 25 years ago, I was actually speaking at an event here in the RDS for the Advertisers Association annual conference. And I was the first speaker. I was lucky enough actually to be the first ever speaker they had to talk about this great new medium of the internet, and what a banner ad would look like, and how many pixels you had to go across. 468, I think I seem to remember, was the magic number of the width of the pixel width of the banner ad. But the guy speaking with me saved the day, because it was a tough audience, not like you guys. A really, really tough, cynical audience of brands and advertisers who were going, what? Oh, we've just got into radio, now we have to go and do something else. There's a whole new medium out there. What a pain in the ass this is going to be. And I was really struggling. I was struggling to get people interested in what was happening. And even though we could see how fast internet advertising was growing in different parts of the world, it hadn't started in Ireland yet. And the guy who saved me, who's sadly dead now, but he was a gentleman called Aidan Burns, who some of you may remember was in charge of television advertising at RTE. And he quite brilliantly stepped in at one point to say, I think it was more a case of don't be giving Damian a hard time just because he's trying to sell something that's a bit new. What he was basically trying to get across was the mindset of people. When he was out there in 1965 selling 5-second ads to people like Boylan's Shoes and other great Irish brands of the past and the current, he had a very, very similar sort of challenge. So Jane Mc Daid, this could be you in 25 years' time. I'm just saying, this could be the sort of the circular path of the marketing services industry. Anyway, wanted to reflect on that. And the other thing I want to reflect on is Alex Gibson. I think that there's a lot of stuff goes on in conferences like this where somebody has to make the whole thing happen. Somebody's got to believe in it. And Alex, I think, from the days when he used to drag me into DIT to talk to students, listening to him, I think were you on Anna Livia FM originally? Anna Livia, my goodness me. What a retro day this is turning into for things which are supposed to be talking about the future, not the past. But Alex, I think you're absolutely tremendous. And I think it's a thankless thing for you to do all the things you've done. The Persuaders radio show, Anna Livia, ARVR, I think it might have even started as an AR event or a VR event, AR marketing. So the world needs people like you, whether it's a real world or a virtual world. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Okay, I've got the most amazing panel with me here today. There are 3 online. I'll come back to them next, but could you please give a big RDS Serpentine Hall welcome for Jane Mc Daid from Thinkhouse. It's very hard to miss. Hello, Jane. How are you doing? Come and sit down. Founder of Thinkhouse and head of creative innovation. Thinkhouse is a very special agency because it's one of the few genuinely global independent agencies operating out of Ireland, and we should be very, very proud of that. We'll come back to Jane in a minute, and also joining online, Aileen Carville from SKMMP. Aileen, are you with us? I can't see the screen. You're there. Excellent. Aileen's from SKMMP, a guru, I think, of the luxury fashion industry, and we'll be talking to Aileen later on. Also, from another part of the world, I think in Canada, we have Julie Smithson from the MetaVRse. Julie, I beg your pardon.
Julie Smithson. Hi, everyone.
Julie, hi.
Nice to see you.
Julie, and apologies, I didn't even know you were coming until literally Alex told me 5 minutes ago, but you're very, very welcome. Terrific.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then, if we're going to go to Canada and even more exotic, perhaps, depending on your point of view, straight to Dubai. Do we have the Paul Hamilton there from Dubai?
Yeah, I'm here as well. Yeah,
excellent.
How you doing?
Okay, so you have, what's the collective noun for gurus? I forget, but we have a smorgasbord of gurus here to discuss the metaverse. And Alex, you've asked me to talk a little bit, give a bit of backdrop in terms of what's going on in the world around the gateway technologies, or if you like, gateway drugs of the metaverse, which of course are augmented reality and virtual reality. I'm a numbers guy. I'm a deal guy now. I used to be in media, as you know, but I'm now an M&A advisor. So I spend a lot of time looking at what's happening in the markets, and what's happening in the markets right now is very, very grim. We'll come on to talking about the economy, and well, it's not about whether we're going into a recession. We are going into a recession. That is without a doubt. I'll come back to that. On the more positive side for AR and VR, the last quarter of 21, there was more money raised for startups in AR and VR than any other time in history. There's $1.9 billion. That's just for startups. 2021, there was $62 billion invested in virtual worlds. Those kind of numbers just don't happen by accident. January, and I know Aileen's a big fan of NFTs. There may be other fans in the room. In January alone, there were $5 billion invested through the OpenSea marketplace for NFTs. That's an extraordinary number. Paris Hilton is getting in on the act as well. Good old Paris Hilton. She's been quiet for a long time. Paris, together with Eric Yuan, who you'll know is the founder of Zoom, have just launched a new metaverse app called IMI, which is now worth $50 million straight away. Epic Games, not to be outdone, have just raised $2 billion. It's giving them a valuation. And this money's come from Lego and Sony, right? Because these brands are voting with their wallets as well as their feet. They want this metaverse thing to happen. It's absolutely clear to me. $30 billion is the new valuation of Epic Games following that round. So, I think with these great gurus we have here, this smorgasbord with Jane and Paul, Aileen and Julie, if you've got a name right, what should businesses be doing? What should businesses, let's start online. Paul, gentleman first from Dubai, what should businesses be doing about the metaverse right now?
Yeah, I get asked every single day by brands, what is it, and what does it mean, and what should I be doing? And the very quick answer we give them is you have permission to experiment. So right now you can get in there and you can start to experiment. And if it's not 100% right, that's fine. You're not going to do any damage to your brand. What you will do is learn. So it's a space that is moving so incredibly fast that having that learning is massively, massively valuable. And you threw out some of those numbers. What's really I'm sure Aileen will talk more about this because it's her field. But the kind of brands that you see doing stuff, it's Balenciaga, it's Gucci. These are very high-end brands. It's Chanel. These are really interesting companies who are going in and experimenting and finding out what they can do, and it's going really well for them. Nike's a big one to call out with Artifact. So the first sneaker drop they did, $3.1 million in 7 minutes. This is real money, right? There's some real stuff happening there. So I'm saying get in there and experiment is the first thing we say.
Yeah, interesting that both the brands you mentioned, Gucci and Nike, both in the wearable space, and of course we have the luxury fashion guru Aileen with us online as well. Aileen, is the metaverse all about fashion?
Well, I think Metaverse commercialized initially with the art space. So if anybody got onto Clubhouse last year, there was a massive flurry of kind of artists, digital artists moving into the space, and I think they really kind of assembled themselves very, very well. They put some infrastructure into how to create groups and communities, and with that, other verticals started to look and listen, and fashion was an obvious one. And the reason why fashion kind of is, you've got people who are not in fashion or belong to the fashion industry experimenting in it, and people from the fashion industry who are potentially resisting experimenting in it just yet until they know more. But fashion is a great vehicle for innovation because people can see themselves in it. It's fun. It's
and everybody has some fashion. Well, not me, but most people.
It's a utility. At the end of the day, you wear clothes, whether you wear it for fun, entertainment, or just purely to cover your body, whatever the case is.
There you go. And Julie, aside from fashion industry, what are the big sectors that you see beating a path to your door to invest in the metaverse?
Yeah, sure. I'm putting my production hat on. Sorry, there's a bit of an echo there. Sorry, putting my production hat on. I'm dealing with, enterprise companies who are actually taking training and transforming that into an immersive experience from the highest levels of enterprise investment. I think that is one of the most significant things that are being done. But then jumping into retail, because I deal with both, we are seeing brands trying to figure out how to put their brand into the metaverse in general, not my metaverse, just to make that clear. But yeah, just thinking about what brands need to do first is taking their brand and what does your brand look like in a spatial environment. That is my first thing I always say from a production point of view. And it's something that, brands need to consider what their brand looks like in 3D. And this is something that brands have never had to do before. Yes. So, what does the logo look like? What are your color palettes? When a user enters into a spatial space, what do you want that space to look like? And these are some of the questions that I'm driving from my production team to just get that thought process started for brands to start to conceptualize how they will be represented in the metaverse. Because it's no longer about a 2D screen or a page in an advertisement of a magazine. Now it's a spatial awareness conversation. And this is where brands are not ready to go there yet. So, and that's why we have to help them. That's why we're having these conversations today, is to get those thoughts going, because we're dealing with unknown territory for everybody here.
Okay, and Jane, firstly, how nice it is to be speaking to somebody who's comprised of atoms and molecules instead of pixels. Jane, what are brands saying to you? What reasons are they giving you not to invest in the metaverse, as well as what's exciting them? What's bringing them to the table?
Yeah, I don't think they're giving us reasons not to invest in the metaverse. They're exploring and getting their head around the whole thing, a bit like getting their head around social 20 years ago. So I think it's, the role of an agency and a consultant is to hold their hand, make them feel comfortable and dream together and have really good dreams that will help their brands continue to grow and flourish. But what I would always say to brands, and it's the premise of which our company is built on, is listen to young people and you'll understand what's coming down the line. And I think when you look and listen to how young people enjoy engaging with each other and with strangers from around the world in very positive ways that have meaningful experiences and help them present themselves to the world in a meaningful way, then the metaverse and gaming is how they choose to do that. And I think even in terms of how they identify with themselves, there was lovely research that I read last week from Razorfish, I think it was, where 52% of young people say that they feel more themselves in the metaverse than they do in real life. So
these were younger people saying
yeah,
this, right?
Yeah, Gen Z, so really late teens, early 20s.
And does that there's a big trust question here, isn't there?
Yeah.
I mean, you were researching that. I was researching something else. It was called the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Have you heard of the Center for Countering Digital Hate? I was blown away by this. I mean, it made the metaverse sound like a happy hunting ground for sexual abuse, for bullying. There were all kinds of stuff going on there about anti 9/11 terror attack, just pretty terrible stuff. I mean, is that what we can learn to? Is that what's going to? Should we? What do we do? What do we do about that?
Well, I guess what we do is we acknowledge that, like the real world, darkness is there. It's very prevalent, and I guess what digital can do is multiply the impact of that, and have as much of a negative impact as it can have a positive impact. So I think when it comes to ethics and concerns and considerations, you really need to surround yourself with experts that ask the
do you think, as an expert, would you say the metaverse is safe?
I guess it's the same question as, is the world safe? So it depends on how you navigate it.
And of course, it's very, very dangerous. We know that at the moment. And Julie, what are you seeing on the area of trust? What has to happen to perhaps not go the same way of the World Wide Web, which just became a playground for privacy abuse and data theft, etc. But what do you think, Julie, as an expert, needs to happen to ensure that the metaverse doesn't go down the same road?
Sure. Well, yeah, absolutely. The data privacy, that conversation has to be had, and it's the responsibility of every brand company, that is inviting them into a space to be able to own that. That both the data capture as well as the communication back to the user to know what is being, what is happening and that sort of thing. The avatar creation process is also going to be a huge, take on of identity, just like you said. We were talking about avatars and, what that is going to be like to portal between worlds, the interoperability of avatars. That is going to be the next biggest thing that humanity is going to be taking on. It's how do I go from world to world as an avatar and protect myself and my identity?
Okay, and we're hearing a lot of these avatars, including my own avatar, which is obviously getting beaten up somewhere in some spurious virtual world. I'm actually feeling a touch of guilt. I haven't checked in with my avatar recently. This could be a whole new department of psychiatry. I'm thinking, Paul, is this about issuing people with a metaverse passport? Will that get around the problem?
I mean, it's interesting you bring it up because all of the existing, especially European data regulation applies equally to the metaverse. So to an extent, those laws are in place. So as a data processor, you have exactly the same responsibilities in order to do that. It's just that the types of data are very different. I've run a couple of hundred different events in the metaverse, and there's all sorts of different ways, just as in the real world, that you can gate entry to these things. And you have to put the same kind of thinking into it as you do in the real world. And that goes all the way from, there's a passcode to get in, you have to pre-register people and check their identity, to, we've done full-on single sign-on access for companies, to put in place exactly the same level of security, because the company will have the same responsibilities under law as they do for anything else.
Does this mean if you're a robot that you have to say you're a robot?
Detecting robots is a challenge that companies have at the moment anyway, which is why we all hate these terrible capture things that we have to do. But there's an interesting challenge. So we talk about synthetic humans. So you'll see some of the influencers like Lil Miquela is one of the most important influencers in the world. She's an avatar, she's a synthetic human. And there's lots of thinking going around, how do we work with synthetic humans and what can we do? What can we do with them, actually? So yeah, these are all issues that, they're under development. There's a lot of thinking going into them. On the question of keeping it safe, when you do have open spaces, something that we've done is have them heavily moderated. So you actually need to have real human beings in there looking after the space and looking out for people causing trouble and kicking them out if that happens. a lot of the considerations are the same as you would have in the real world.
And Aileen, last word on trust from yourself. What do you think has to happen to engender more trust in this new virtual world?
Okay, well, there are definitely companies out there looking at sort of verifying credentials, and there's different kind of tiers around that, which would probably involve a kind of a ID passport for the metaverse. But yeah, look at, you know, humans and where we inhabit, there's going to be people who are going to exploit places. So, that gray area of where people are going to masquerade as others, etc. But trust, I think what's different about the metaverse is that the metaverse is created as a community, and these communities are creating DAOs, so those decentralized autonomous organizations. And within these infrastructures, this trust is being embedded into that sort of matrix of the DAO. And I think that's where tokenism, where the NFTs, where all of these sort of agreements are laid out and mapped out and ingrained on the ledgers. And I think with that, kind of personal IDs will also be embedded into that when they come. So more transparency and more sort of concrete identity within the metaverse, I believe.
Okay, and hold that thought on NFT, because I'm going to come straight back to you in a second. You've heard the expression, perhaps before in the past, sell in May and go away? Yeah? Heard that one? It's fairly well, it's an old phrase, but it basically used to refer to private investors, that it was a good time to cash things in, because things tended to get a bit sloppy. Traditionally, once things got into May, maybe people were working less or around the workplace less, but the expression was sell in May and go away. And quick look at NASDAQ since January. We said we would talk a bit about the economy. NASDAQ is down 25%. Any Bitcoin people here? Bitcoin? No? Okay, 55% down since the peak. Are you worried? You're worried, okay, as an honest Bitcoiner. Usually it's, oh no man, just buy him the dip, man. Just buy him the dip. It's gonna, sick of them. Anyway, well done you. And 41 Chinese cities currently in lockdown. Yeah. About 30% of the GDP. But the one that really I found staggering was that in the last couple of days, that $1 trillion has evaporated from tech stocks. And I think that all indications there with the economy, with the war, with interest rates, with inflation, that we are in a recession now. And I remember one thing about marketing services, that when things get tight, the first thing a marketer will do is probably avoid all the new stuff and stop trialing new ideas and just stick to the knitting. Mm-hmm. I suppose the knitting these days is probably what SEO work or keywords on Google or something like that. But what should they do? I mean, should people hold off experimenting or should they still get stuck into metaverse?
Well, I guess I have privilege of an experience of working through a recession when my company was established and built, and we were emerging as a new agency on the scene, and our specialty was digital and content, social. So the exact same question would have been posed to me before the last recession, and I guess my confidence in the future of digital and the changes within marketing would be validated further by a period of time where people need to reflect on what will work better, where will my book go a little bit further, a bit like the great reset that we had during COVID in terms of people's reflections on how they want to live their lives, the environmental impact and the changes required there. So I think we will thrive. Anybody who's digitally focused in their marketing efforts, certainly in my world, is in growth at the moment. We've had a great recession. We're good in recessions, and I would say that this is the time to adopt a more future-focused and forward-thinking approach, because I don't think leaning back into how marketing used to be done would be a safe approach for anybody.
Okay, so that's a good point. I mean, the game has changed. Julie, what are you seeing at the moment?
Yeah, so first of all, we're not going backwards. I've been in immersive technology for over 10 years. We're only moving forward. So whether you keep up or not, it's totally, it's the prerogative of every business. But I do believe that businesses can take on certain stages and start to learn about what they can do. I talked earlier about, what does your 3D brand look like in an immersive space? Well, what about assets? Let's talk about assets. If you're going to be selling something in the space, you need all of those assets made into, optimizable, assets that can be produced on a game engine. And that there is a whole process. Creating a storyboard about what an experience would be like about your brand is another process. So to me, businesses should be looking at all of these pieces and starting to put those phases together, because you're not going to create a whole brand new experience in like 4 weeks or even a couple of months. It's going to take time, because you're learning as you're going and you're innovating. You have to figure out your deployment method. That's like wrapping your head around how you're going to deploy this and the integrations that would happen in the back end. There's so much conversation there. So there's a lot of planning, and people think that they can jump right into it and create an experience that'll be ready just like that. But there's actually so much that a business or a brand has to think about before we go into production, that take this time right now to learn as much as you can, figure out your business and how you're going to reach those users or customers on the other end to transform that to sales.
And Paul, how are things in Dubai? Is it good? Maybe not a good time to innovate. Maybe we should be drawing our sort of purse strings a little tighter, perhaps the next couple of years, or should we just, to hell with that, let's just go for it?
This entire nation has a growth mindset in terms of everything they approach. So it was just in the news this morning, the government of Dubai has set up a special commission to look at the metaverse and what it means. The country is already building a digital twin. And last week launched a regulator it's actually in the sandbox. They're actually building a VR/AR regulator in the sandbox to start those conversations about where it should go. And a lot of that is still around thinking, right? So we always talk about, thinking before you start to build, before you start to scale. And a lot of that is still at the thinking stage, and that's a good place to be. As Julie said, the thinking isn't so expensive. It's massively valuable, and it gets you a head start. And those conversations, need to happen. I think also on Julie's point is moving forward. This will happen at some point. And I think what's driving brands to pay more attention now is people are old enough to remember, back in the early 2000s, I sat in a meeting in a very grand office at the top of the Champs-Élysées, talking about how the internet was going from being brochureware to being an interactive place to where content would be generated by users. And 6 middle-aged, grey-haired men, and they all were men, sat around the table, said, God, that sounds ghastly, looking at other people's holiday photos. God, I don't want to do that. And 2 years later, YouTube launched, and the year after that, Facebook launched. So there are people who remember being very skeptical before, and they're looking at this and saying, actually, maybe we need to pay attention to this. Yeah, and we see it very much as an evolution,
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you get the image of, imagine walking around before social media, walking around showing people photographs of what you had for breakfast, they might think you're a little peculiar, I suppose, but there we go. And Aileen, as somebody who's clearly immersed in the NFT world, journalists are saying this is crypto winter. Is winter coming, Aileen?
Oh, I don't know. So I think what has happened, we have to look at what has happened before this financial crisis. And we were through COVID. I think COVID was the massive pause that the entire world had to go through together. And during that time, all of this forward thinking people were forced to look ahead for the very first time in unity. And NFTs have emerged, it's accessible, it's really fast, brilliant technology. And really, as we move forward, we've got fashion artifacts, etc., but we're really going to see NFTs used as our own personal sort of effects, such as dental records, medical records, even your eyewear subscriptions. So Potentially, I just don't see NFTs, losing ground at all. I think they really are, we're at the very immature stage of growth here. Only a few verticals have really kind of taken them on, but I think as we see it moving into identity and moving into other services and verticals, it's going to really start spiking.
Okay, thank you very, very much indeed for that. I'm going to sort of just quickly move on to asking about biggest challenge out there is quite simply, what is the metaverse going to have to do? What's its proposition going to have to look like in order for it to be adopted?
Well, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think you fish where the fish are, and to continue from a marketer or a brand's perspective, being where the people are, being where your audience is, and adding value to that space.
Okay. Any of the panelists, Paul, Aileen, Julie, want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add it's where people spend time, right? So right now, people spend time staring at their mobile phones. They spend a couple of hours a day on average. I think that the data from Gartner is like 2.25 hours a day, which, I have 2 kids at university. It's a hell of a lot more than 2.25 hours a day, I can tell you that. But their estimate is that within the next 2 years, 60% of people in the world will be spending more than an hour a day in some kind of virtual metaverse type environment, whatever that is. That's a place where you want to be as a marketer. That's where people are spending their time. It's absolutely as simple as Jane says. You need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think it's also, it's a social experiment. We want to be, just like we just said, we want to be where everybody else is. And I think that's another big piece for brands to consider about creating their own communities, because that's what will bring them back, right? And I talk about building a 3-pronged approach in experiences so that it teaches them about the brand and they get to play with it. And then they get to play a game where they get a reward, and that reward brings them back to that experience. So this 3-pronged approach and creating that social environment where they can meet others, where they can, like our metaverse, we're launching a mall where you're going to be able to shop together as avatars. That's a community and social experience that will attract more and more people into, breaking the barriers to entering into that metaverse.
Okay, let me just ask any questions from the audience. We know time is not our friend right now, and I know I'm between you and a pint across the road. Alex is going to tell you whereabouts to go for a pint. Any questions from the audience? Gentleman over here on the right. Hiya. Yes.
Preference in terms of engagement, or is it? Are there any preferences?
Preferences from people, from consumers? Well, you see the push, and Meta are advertising now on radio is quite interesting for VR headsets. So the adoption of VR headsets and the goals and targets around them on a global perspective from the big players are pretty frightening. So I think in the very long term, it would be in that headset space because you have a much more immersive experience. But I think in terms of adoption, easy access, frictionless through a browser would be definitely preferable, in my view.
And question for someone on the panel, gentleman, the Bitcoin miner himself. I think it's down 2 more percentage points since we started the session, by the way. So.
First of all, thank you so much, and congratulations to all the organizers. It's a great event, and thank you so much for the invite. I feel there are 2 things to add values. One way is you bundle things together, and the second one is where you unbundle things together. So I'm more interested in decentralization part, and I just wanted to understand what role Web3 would play in Metaverse. Is it like will go parallel within it, or do you see a major role of Web3 in Metaverse?
So can you give me that again?
I just wanted to know what role Web3 would play in Metaverse. Is it going to be a major part of it, or is it something parallel to it? So yeah, more like basically decentralized path of the metaverse.
Julie, Web 3.0? Driving the metaverse?
Yeah, Web 3.0 is going to be a whole part of it, right? Like there's AI, blockchain, and all of these things are going to come together. So, we're all going to come in together in one world all together, and all of these pieces, whether it's NFTs or blockchain, and all the transactions will start to happen at once. So, I think to answer your question, there won't be any silos here. It's all these worlds will start to come together. I hope I answered that question.
So when should we expect this?
Yesterday. No, just joking. It's happening. It's happening behind the scenes. Like Paulo was just talking about avatars, synthetic avatars that have an AI background in the background. That's happening already. NFTs are happening. Aileen was just talking about it. Like all of these things are starting to come together. So don't think it's not happening. It is happening, and it's already happening. It's in the works.
We'll revisit it in 25 years' time, and I'll come back again if I'm still around, and we'll see what's going on then. But look, just to the audience again, hands up those of you who feel more excited about the metaverse than you did 30 minutes ago. Oh, come on, well done, well done. Okay, we have converted my fantastic panel, Paul Hamilton and Aileen Carville and Julie Smithson, and Jane Mc Daid from Thinkhouse PR. We didn't get to talk today, Jane, about climate action and sustainability. I did have a question about whether or not the boxes that the headsets come in are very sustainable, but that's probably a question for...
It's more the data and the energy required to facilitate this Web3. I think that's a whole other panel, perhaps.
I think it's a whole other conference, the Metaverse thing. But let me leave you with a thought, okay? And again, this was said to me 25 years ago when I was talking about banner ads, and what was said to me was this, that leaders that shy away from uncertainty will soon be operating in a world defined by other people. I'm going to try that again. So leaders that shy away from uncertainty will soon be operating in a world that's defined by other people. And maybe that's one of the drivers that are out there. Maybe this is why people like BMW have managed to digital twins of 31 factories now, which is an extraordinary investment. NatWest, who I've always thought NatWest Bank were probably one of the most conservative brand ever. But these guys are doing an incredible stuff now with Spatial.io, Women in Business, and they're actually bringing the story of women business founders into this virtual environment, which actually should be the bank. My experience of looking at that was, well, why go halfway? Why just talk about the success of some of their customers when they could be doing the whole thing in this way? But lots of exciting times ahead, clearly. Well, we've definitely out of time. And I need you to give a massive RDS thank you to Jane Mc Daid and to our panelists, Paul and Julie and Aileen. And you've been, well, out of all the audiences, you've been the most recent. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Short and sweet. Yeah. So, the conclusion of the conference is one where people, whatever about not wanting to be separated from their lunch, they definitely don't want to be separated from their pint. I think that's fair to say. So, I'm going to keep this really brief. Thanks to the panel that we've just had. It was really great discussion. At the end of the day, it's never easy to get people's attention, and you've done a great job. You really have, Aileen, Paul, Jane, and Julie, and a special thank you to Damian. You can see from Damian's approach, he's very thorough. He's done his research, and I do appreciate that. He's taken a lot of time and care and consideration in the panel. What you said about me, I'll leave others to judge, but thank you very much for those. I'll certainly take those comments and bank them. It's really great.